When we walk with the Lord in the light of His word, what a glory He sheds on our way. While we do His good will, He abides with us still, and with all who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Not a shadow can rise, not a cloud in the skies, but His smile quickly drives it away. Not a doubt or a fear, not a sigh or a tear can abide while we trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Not a burden we bear, not a sorrow we share, but our toil He doth quickly repay. Not a grief or a loss, not a frown nor a cross, but is blessed if we trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Then in fellowship sweet we will sit at His feet, or we'll walk by His side in the way. And what He says we will do, where He sends we will go. Never fear, only trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Cook. Today is Wednesday, tax day. Dun, dun, dun. Anyway, it's good to be with you on today. As some of you may know, last week at this time we were having a funeral for my mom, and I appreciate so much those of you that knew her and you were praying for her and everything. And it's been a struggle for the last 2 years for her, and she is definitely in a much better place. She's with Jesus and she's with my dad, and she's probably telling them exactly how they could do things better, if you know my mom. Anyway, we are starting a new series here at 3 Point Bible Church, and it's called Red Letter Words. And some of you are familiar with the red letter Bibles, and those are Bibles, when you open them up, you'll see like a lot of red in certain areas. It's nothing different. It just means the ones in red, those are the words, the actual words that Jesus spoke. And so it's real easy to say, okay, what did Jesus say about this? Well, you can just kind of scroll through all of the red markings in the red letter Bible, and you could see what Jesus said about everything. In Matthew chapter 7, he says this, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine," and this is Jesus speaking, it says, "and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock." And Jesus spoke a lot of times in parables, and he gives this story of a man that builds his home on a rock and a man who builds his home on the sand. And a storm comes, and you know the story. The house on the rock remains firm and isn't destroyed, yet the house on the sand is washed away. It's completely destroyed. As Jesus is telling this story, there's a couple things to think about. You know, we think, oh, that's a nice story. You know, build smart, but it's deeper than that. In other words, both builders knew how to build. Both builders knew and experienced the same storm. Both builders were going to have to live with whatever the consequences of their building and the storm and their preparation and everything else. So for us, it could mean we all have heard these words from Jesus. We've all know what the truth is, yet some continue to build their lives on the rock, on the truth, on Jesus. Yet others still hear the same words, but yet choose a shortcut, choose a cheaper way to build, choose a cheaper way to listen. In other words, yeah, Jesus, I agree with those things that you said, but man, I don't get this part, and so I'm just going to go about my way. And in our lives, what happens, we are all faced with the same storms, culture, heartache, depression, all of these things that come upon us. If our house is not built on the solid rock of Jesus, if we don't have a firm foundation, then we are susceptible to being just blown away or washed away or losing our faith. And so we can listen to sermons, we can read scripture, we can even discuss our faith. We can talk about these things, but Jesus is after something deeper. He's saying a life that actually reflects what he says is one that obeys my words, that follows me, that does what I have said. Not perfectly, but intentionally. And that's where the rubber meets the road. We don't have to be perfect. In fact, we'll never be perfect. Jesus was perfect. But we are to build our house. We are to build our faith. We are to build our lives on the words of Jesus. And not just to hear the words, like James says. You know, we've got to do more than hear. We've got to act on what we hear and do what he tells us to do. And so this week, think about maybe what's one thing Jesus has already told you to do, and maybe you haven't acted on it yet. And what will that look like? And trying to do everything at once, that's not smart either. It's one step at a time. And we call that our daily disciplines, Bible study, prayer, spending time in the presence of Jesus. And so anyway, I wanted you to think about living differently. And if you don't have a church home, we would love for you to come join us as we get into this series, Red Letter Words. And we're going to look at words that Jesus said and then how we are going to apply them to our lives, to live differently, to live like his disciples. And so I would love to hear your thoughts. We meet every Sunday at 11 o'clock for praise, worship, and prayer and fellowship. We gather together on Wednesday nights tonight for dinner at 6, and then we break into small groups. We're actually starting to study the book of Revelation. We're going to look at Jesus' words in Revelation, and so we invite you to come be a part of that. And again, let me know always how I can pray for you. It's a privilege for me to be able to pray for you and spend time with you. Anyway, let me know your thoughts and build your house and your house of faith on the solid rock, and that solid rock is Jesus Christ. And I will see you next Wednesday, or maybe even this Sunday, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.